Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to Analyst presented to you by Vajiram and Ravi. Here we discuss 7 articles in 2 different sections taken from 2 newspapers, The Hindu and Indian Express, consolidating your current affair for UPSC CSE at one place. In the first analysis section, we discuss Goldilocks economy, understanding the 5.25% repo decisions taken by Monetary Policy Committee, what are its implications and what it signals for the Indian economy. Next up, in the India-Russia reset, we understand that key takeaways from the President Putin's visit. We take a look at the various agreements undertaken by him. Next, in the simplified section, we discuss 5 articles from the prelims perspective of 2026 with a lot of value addition, so stay tuned. Starting with the first topic, we have Goldilocks economy, understanding the 5.25% repo decision. In this recent cut by Monetary Policy Committee, this showcases the rare optimism in the India's growth story. The RBI governor has called Indian economy to be in the Goldilocks zone. What does it mean? It means that the position of Indian economy right now is very congenial. It is congenial for growth, it is congenial in terms of inflation, and it is supposedly the most optimal it can be. As we can see that this decision comes in the light of recent decline in the headline inflation to 1.7% in the last quarter, as well as the economic growth rising to 8.2% in the second quarter of this financial year. This is an allegory, this is an use of figure of speech that compares Indian economic position. In the space vocabulary, Goldilocks zone is referred to the place where the temperature is neither too high nor the temperature is too cold, which makes it very much possible for the water to be available there. Similarly, when we talk about Indian economy right now, we have GDP growth at a higher rate, inflation at a low rate, which make for a macroeconomically very stable position. And this is also important in the context of the previous year question. UPSC has already asked this kind of questions, that do you agree with the view that the steady GDP growth and low inflation have left the economy in good shape? Does this all count? Is that all about it? We'll discuss the idea of this question as well as what this decision of Monetary Policy Committee would entail in the future. How is it going to affect India? But let's first discuss the basic. What is this Monetary Policy Committee? It is basically an institution that was created under this RBI Act 1934. It was amended in the year 2016, which provided for an inflation targeting framework. The goal of this institution is to target inflation and keep it in a band range of 4 plus minus 2%. So the ideal inflation rate should be between 2% to 6%. And this Monetary Policy Committee, which is comprising of 6 members, 3 of them given including members of RBI, 1 RBI governor, 1 RBI deputy governor and 1 official nominated by RBI, 3 external members who are nominated by Government of India. This body, including these 6 members, they meet at least 4 times a year, but by convention they meet every 2 months to decide on this repo rate. It is replacing the previous arrangement of this technical advisory committee. This is an accountable body, so if they are not able to maintain the inflation within this band range, they are accountable to the government, who then is answerable to the parliament. But then what is this repo rate? Why are they changing it to maintain this inflation? Repo rate is part of this liquidity adjustment facility, which is a monetary policy tool given to the Reserve Bank of India or any central bank of any country to promote the idea of macroeconomic stability, to ensure a balance between inflation versus growth. There is always a dichotomy in them. Either inflation would be very high or growth would be very high. It is always a challenge to balance them. In the present situation, what we are seeing is a Goldilocks zone, because inflation right now is low but growth is high. This is what, given this situation, MPC has taken a decision to reduce the repo rate by 25 basis point to 5.25. This repo rate basically means repurchase option rate. What do we mean by that? Understand that this is basically an arrangement under which the banks would seek money from Reserve Bank of India and would give them some security. They would pledge some security, by which they are also giving an agreement where they are given the option that they could repurchase their securities back whenever they return the loan amount. So because the banks have given this security and they have the option to repurchase their securities back from the Reserve Bank whenever they make the payment, this system, this mechanism is known as repurchase option, and the rate at which RBI lends to the bank in exchange of these security, this is known as repo rate, which is often modulated in order to make a balance between this inflation versus growth. Moving from these basic things, what does this news entail? Let's decode this. What has happened right now is, if we look at the long-term view of situation, that in the RBI's estimates, they have understood that there is supposed to be an upward revision of the GDP. Earlier they were targeting 6.8% GDP growth in this year. Now they believe it would be around 7.3%, and then there is a downward revision in the inflation rate. Inflation is now supposedly down from 2.6% to 2%. The expectation is down. So taking an advantage of that, because inflation is right now low, they think that if they would reduce this repo rate, that means the rate at which banks are getting money would be lower. So the rate at which they would lend also would be lower. The impact of that would be that the loans, the personal loan, the consumer loan, the investment loans that the banks would give to the consumer as well as industries, it would also be at lower rate. This would further boost growth. This was the whole idea. To take advantage of this situation, they have reduced the repo rate. Now this is the situation that the government would always want. They would always want that the loans should be cheaper so that people can consume more, buy more, produce more, and lead to more economic growth. But then why does not RBI do it all the time? Or the Monetary Policy Committee don't do it all the time? Because there are concerns regarding inflation. If there is too much money that is given to the people, if there is too much liquidity, people would start consuming more, buying more. It may be a mismatch between the demand and supply and may lead to rising inflation. But right now, as we just saw, that inflation is very benign. It is very normal. It is even less than normal at 2%. Then it does not make a cause of worry that even if the liquidity is raised in the economy, it would not cause inflation to be a galloping inflation. It would not be a very running inflation. It would be only a creeping inflation. We would discuss these phenomena. Now here they are able to reinforce the positive momentum in investment because economy is already growing. That means there is already a momentum in them without jeopardizing the price stability, without raising inflation to unsustainable level. That was the whole situation that RBI or the Monetary Policy Committee has taken advantage of. If we took at the long term view here, in the past 1 year, the repo rate has been reduced by more than 100 basis point. It has been reduced from 6.25% to 5.25% in just 1 year. So there is a persistent deployment of liquidity in the economy. Another interesting fact here is that the RBI or the Monetary Policy Committee, they have unanimously agreed for this rate cut, the repo rate cut. But there has been a divergence in opinion with a 5:1 majority with regard to the stance it takes, the monetary policy stance. What does this stance thing means? It means there are three kinds of stance basically. One is an accommodative stance, one is a neutral stance, one is a tightening stance. Here they were not in agreement, there was not a unanimous agreement on the stance because most of them believed that economic stance should be neutral. What does a neutral stance means? It means that there is no strong direction that is given. This stance, understand this as a concept, it is like a hint that the RBI or the monetary policy would be giving to the economy, to the market, to the consumer, to the investors, that how the monetary policy would entail in the future. This stance showcases the hint, how it gives a signal, how the monetary policy would pan out in the coming future. Most of the members, they voted for this neutral stance where they are not giving any strong direction, because although the GDP growth has been very high in the past few time, it is still, there are downward concerns here. There is possibility that it may soften down. Even though the inflation is also very low, there are concerns that food and fuel inflation, which is always volatile in nature, it may crop up. Thus, there is need for maintenance of neutral stance. Some members voted for accommodative stance because it means that they would even further reduce repo rates in the upcoming Monetary Policy Committee decisions. RBI has not, this Monetary Policy Committee has not taken this stance but promoted this one. The idea of an accommodative stance is to boost growth and credit. It would make for a very aggressive policy of RBI's Monetary Policy Committee. In the neutral stance, they are going to balance growth and inflation. Here we are putting and prioritizing growth over inflation. Here there is a balance of growth and inflation. When there is a tightening stance, which means that the RBI or the Monetary Policy Committee would be tightening the liquidity supply, they are basically more concerned about the inflation, and then they would be targeting primarily this inflation thing. So these are the three kind of stance that you must know about this. Now if we see the Goldilocks scenario that has been panning out in our country, imagine the scenario of 2013 when we had inflation at around 10% and economic growth at mere 5.5%. Then we had COVID and the inflation was as it was around 4-5%, but the economic growth plummeted to a negative 5.8%. Then due to this base effect, because the denominator became so low, any economic growth that happened in the post-COVID year, it was depicting a very sharp increase. Thus there was a 9.7% increase in the GDP growth in that year. But over the time period, if we see the past 2-3 years, we are seeing a positive trajectory of economic growth which has been rising. It was 6.5% in the fiscal year ending 25 and it is expected to be 8% for this fiscal year ending 2026. And at the same time, this inflation chart, it is going downwards. It is softening. It is now reduced to mere 1.9% as the expected. Here they have said it will be around 2%. So we would take that as an optimistic target. Now moving to the implication of it, like if they have reduced this repo rate, what it would entail to the economy. First, it would of course boost consumption and investment. If repo rate has been reduced, it would lead to cheaper loan be available. Banks would be offering loans to the consumer, to the investor at a very low interest rate to purchase thing on credit. It would incentivize the businesses to purchase more assets on loan. Thus, it would enhance the investment in economy, it is expected. And because it would enhance investment, it would enhance consumption, it would also lead to greater employment. Thus, a win-win situation for macroeconomic framework. Then it would boost the market sentiment. I mean, people would have a lot more money to invest, even in the stock market, where we are witnessing right now there is a decline in the FDI that is happening. The domestic investor, because RBI, the Monetary Policy Committee has reduced the rates, the loans would be available to them at a cheaper rate. They might take credit and invest in the stock market. Thus, it would boost the sentiment in the market and would enhance the rally of bull stocks. It would enhance the stock market to rise. It is targeted that it would help manage the creeping inflation. What is creeping inflation? Creeping inflation basically means a situation where inflation rate is much lower than 5%. It is an average. If it is around 2% or 3%, it is said to be a creeping inflation. If it is a greater inflation than 10%, it is called as a galloping inflation. And then if it is more than 30%, it is called as a hyperinflation. These are the situations that we don't want to be in. Right now we are witnessing creeping inflation where inflation is very low. If it reduces further, then there would be no incentive for the producer to produce more. A little bit of inflation is necessary in a country. It is a double-edged sword. Too high is also not a good thing. Too low is also not a good thing. Then it would balance the fiscal and monetary policies. Right now we witnessed that government of India under the GST reform, they have reduced taxation. They have reduced the rate of GST on various consumer items. They have reduced GST rate on cars. They have reduced on appliances. This has led to a greater consumption, greater investment that has happened. But then that is done now. All the heavyweight exercising, all the heavyweight lifting that could be done, it has to be done by the monetary policy only. Why I say so? Because if the government has undertaken GST rationalization, that means they have lost some fiscal space there. This fiscal space means that government does not have much more money to directly inject into the economy. They cannot spend very well because their revenue coming from GST would have reduced by some lakh crore. So if government wants to give stimulus to the economy, give push to the economy, then monetary policy would have to take a leading step here. And by reducing this repo rate, they have tried to do so. They are now trying to inject more liquidity in the economy because they have reduced the rate. So if the government is directly not giving money to people, at least people can buy and spend. At least people can take credit and spend more. That would lead to the GDP growth momentum to rise and rise further. Then it is also targeted to meet the expectations. Although the GDP growth, if we saw in the last graph, it is rising for the past few years, but the government expected it to rise too much more. In the budget, they expected the economic growth, the nominal economic GDP growth to be 10.1%. But as per the target, it is not bad at 8.8, but there is still scope for more. To help to reach these expected targets of 10.1%, some steps have been taken under this monetary policy decision. Also, to manage this external risk, it is very important that repo cut was supposed to be done. We have seen the external risk in terms of exports. Indian exports have declined over the period of time. In the month of November, it was reported that export clocks fall in 14 months. For the past 14 months, they have reduced their lowest level. Thus, since exports are declining, it is required by the government to do something to incentivize these exports. And by reducing the rate of interest, maybe the exporting company would be able to borrow at a lower rate. It would make their exports more competitive in the global market. And this is supposed to be a good sign for the economy. This is how Monetary Policy Committee or the RBI is trying to push the limit of the economy, is trying to push the economy to a greater height. But there are certain concerns with this approach. Even though the MPC has taken this decision to reduce the repo rate by 25 basis points, there are concerns going forward because there is a risk of currency. The rupee is sliding. It has now breached the psychological barrier of 90 rupees per $1. And if we are going to inject more liquidity in the economy by way of repo rate decline, it would further increase the supply of money, increase the supply of Indian rupee in the economy. That would make also lead to a downward pressure to the rupee's position. Because right now what is happening, we have too much rupee, less of dollar. If we are increasing the liquidity, then it would increase the supply of rupee further, and there is a risk that this barrier of 90 rupees per dollar would be breached again. The next issue is monetary policy transmission. Even though the repo rate has been reduced, but whether it would entail to an actual decline in the lending rate, that is a question. Because even though monetary policy decisions have been taken, whether they would transmit to the actual consumer level, that is marked by a lot of differences. Sometimes banks are not able to pass on this benefit to the consumer because there are issues with the actual availability of durable liquidity. You understand that this repo rate is basically targeting the liquidity is given to the banks by the RBI with exchange of some securities. But this is very transient or very short term in nature. The durable liquidity might not be available with the bank, and they might not have placed or linked their interest rate to the actual repo rate, which is called as a benchmark rate. Because of these two differences, that they don't have liquidity and they have not linked their bank rate or their lending rate with this repo rate, then the monetary policy transmission may not even happen. So the result that we were desiring, it may not even translate in real terms. That is a cause of concern. We have the data sanctity issue. Recently, we saw a few days back that this IMF, International Monetary Fund, has given a C grade to India in the data. We have seen a lot of concerns with the kind of data that we are publishing raised by these global bodies that makes this data-based policy a problematic thing. Because if the data itself is flawed, if the deflator that we are using is flawed, and there might be some issue with the CPI, what CPI is trying to record here, it may not actually represent the reality. So the data sanctity issue may actually impact the real monetary policy. Then we have the asset bubble issue. It happened in the 2008 financial crisis because of lot of liquidity in the market. People borrowed and invested into assets which were not financially sustainable themselves. So it may lead to a lot of lending that is happening, and people are investing in a bubble of an asset. These assets which are not real, they may lead to speculative investment in the economy and may have long-term concerns for the stability of the economy in general. So these are the concerns that remain with this decision. But then what is the way forward? What do we do about it? Going forward, we must manage the inflation expectations proactively. It should not only be seen by the lagging indicator of CPI, but also lagging indicator means that once the inflation rates have been recorded for a month, after a lag of 1 or 2 months, this CPI or consumer price index data comes. That is a lagging indicator. If we are trying to proactively manage the inflation expectation, we must also rely on the household expenditure survey, where household themselves tell what is their perception of inflation, what do they think about the inflation, how inflation is actually panning out in the real economy. Even though we saw in the last few slides that inflation, retail inflation is 0.25%, but to a common man that would seem very amusing, very bewildering, because inflation that we are seeing, it is slightly more than that, if not very high. There is a genuine concern of rising prices. It can certainly not be 0.25%. So there is need for reality check for this inflation. Then we have this address supply side bottlenecks. Why does inflation happen? It happens because maybe there is more demand. Demand may be fueled by this money that we are injecting in the economy by, let's say, reducing the repo rate. But then inflation may also be due to the supply side bottleneck. There is a lack of genuine supply from the supply end. The factories are not able to produce more. Even if the demand remains normal and flat, because the factories are not able to produce more because of issues like infrastructural deficit, they are not having the capacity to store, they are having lack of cold storage, let's say, for food and perishable item. Thus these issues would be a consistent concern with respect to inflation. But if we manage the supply side bottleneck by, let's say, greater infrastructure investment, where we don't have the supply side bottlenecks, then the inflation would ease out normally. We have to monitor the external vulnerabilities very proactively, in the sense that how the rupee versus dollar is panning out, how exports are going to happen, if there is a possibility of decline in terms of the vulnerability that India has, because there are a lot of FTA deals that are in limbo right now, they are not being concluded. So they have to be managed along with this monetary policy thing. We have to enhance the monetary transmission efficiency. As we discussed, even though the rates are reduced, whether they are actually translating to the rate cuts in the banking lending rates, that has to be ensured by linking this benchmark linked lending. These lending rate of banks should be linked to the such benchmark rate. Benchmark rate could be repo rate, it could be marginal standing facility rate, it could be any benchmark, any financial benchmark, but it must be linked so that the transmission happens automatically. We have to ensure deepening of the corporate bond market so that people actually invest more in the market. The money becomes very visible and it does not become a storehouse of wealth. People must not stow away their cash, they must not store them in their houses. They must invest it somewhere. This money must be circulated in the economy, either in the bank, in the bond market, share market, wherever. But if it is circulating in the economy, then the transmission of this monetary policy would happen at a much efficient rate. We have to protect financial stability by ensuring greater CAR, AR of the banks. As we discussed, that it should not lead to subpar lending. If the rates are low, that doesn't mean that you lend it to anybody. It should be, there must be proper checks and balances regarding the quality of the asset that is being purchased there. So the credit risk adjusted capital ratio must be ensured from the bank side as per the Basel III norms that we discussed the other day. There must be targeted credit support over broad liquidity. Instead of this sledgehammer approach of increasing broad-based liquidity, if we can target certain sectors which are supposedly sunrise sector of Indian economy, then that would make more sense. For example, if we want to target economy, if we want to target economic growth and employment, first we must focus on the labor intensive sector, the sectors which are there in the production linked incentive scheme. The 14 sector including semiconductor, textiles, footwear, food processing. These kind of sectors, if are targeted, they are promoted over the broad based lending, over the broad liquidity concerns, then it would be a more efficient way of promoting liquidity to the sector, to the economy. Thus, we have discussed the forward and backward issues with the repo rate decisions of Monetary Policy Committee. This is a practice question for you. Kindly attempt it and get it evaluated from your mentors. Moving to the next topic, we have India-Russia reset, key takeaways from Putin's visit. Recently, President Putin was in India. He had concluded multiple agreements which showcases a major shift in India-Russia relations. What is this shift? Honorable Prime Minister Modi gave this title of India-Russia relationship being akin to a pole star. He called it a Dhruv Tara. In the ancient time when there was no compass, there was no direction telling you by Google Maps, people used to walk distances by looking at the pole star at night and the sun in the morning. A pole star always signals the northward direction. In this context of international relation, why Prime Minister Modi ji called this relation as a pole star? Because it is always symbolizing stability. That is the whole idea of calling it as a pole star. There is a stability in the relationship when the whole international relations are in flux. There is a degradation of multilateralism. There are a lot of changes that are taking place. Once we had an era of only one superpower, then we see China rising as another challenge to becoming a superpower. We are seeing the flux in the geopolitical scenario in the Indo-Pacific. We are seeing a lot of geopolitical tensions. Amid all these changes happening, India-Russia relationship has remained stable as a pole star. That is what he tried to depict. But why are we talking about this shift in India-Russia relationship? To know that, let's understand the past. Although in the last session of Analyst, we had comprehensively covered the background of India-Russia relationship on the eve of visit of Honorable President Putin to India. But to take a brief overview of that again, in 1971 during the Bangladesh Liberation War, India signed a treaty of peace and friendship with Russia, with the Soviet Union of that time, and they agreed to supply us major defense articles during this war, which proved very crucial in our victory. Come the year 2000 and we elevated our partnership to the level of strategic partnership. It was engraved further in stone when in the year 2010 when we further elevated it to a privileged and special strategic partnership. Thus this year 2025 visits marks the 25 or the silver jubilee of this celebration of strategic partnership between India and Russia. There was a happening of 23rd annual summit between Indian Prime Minister and Russian President. The plank of this relation, however, during this course of time has been majorly defense oriented. We have purchased a lot of missiles, lot of equipments from the Russia. We have been even jointly developed a lot of things. For example, this BrahMos missile is an example of joint production of defense articles. The Sukhoi and the MiG-29 fighter jets. All of this has been the plank or the major driving force behind the relationship between India and Russia. We have had some sort of developmental cooperation as well. For example, when India was trying to set up first of its initial industrialization, when we were trying to set up some steel plant in our country, Soviet Union helped us with the setting up the Bhilai steel plant in the year 1955. But this has been few and far between. Majorly it has been defense oriented as well as a strategic cooperation that we had at various global forums. India has been supported by Russia at various multilateral forums, for example UN Security Council. It has always supported India's stand on the Kashmir issue, that it should be a bilateral dispute between India and Pakistan. It has prevented embarrassments to India by vetoing certain resolution on the issue of Kashmir, on the location of G20, on the cause of UN Security Council expansion, membership of India to UNSC. Russia has consistently supported us. Thus, the relationship has been very strong, but its orientation has been very narrow. There was hardly any economic cooperation worth speaking of. The bilateral trade was just less than $10 billion. We have had greater bilateral trade than this with smaller nations of ASEAN. However, this shift of President Putin marks a remarkable change in the India-Russia relation trajectory, because for the first time we have had less emphasis on the defense. That is a visible trend over the years, because while Russia has remained by far the largest supplier for arms and ammunition to India, in the year 2010 to 2014 as per SIPRI report, 72% of all the arms import that India did was from Russia. It has over the period gradually declined to just 36% in this 20 to 24 period. Even though it still remains the largest supplier of arms and ammunition as a one country, but the scale of reduction is dramatic. It has more to do with the Indian factors, because India has tried to diversify its sources. We now import a lot of arms and ammunition from Israel, France, USA, which remain among the top 4 suppliers to arms and ammunition of India. And it also has to do with the other external factors also. One could be a Western sanctions. USA has implemented CAATSA, or countering America adversary through sanctions, where it does not want other friendly nations to buy more Russian weapons, even though India, being strategically autonomous and possessing a lot of sovereignty, it has violated these sanctions because there have been exception that has been given to India, and thus India still purchase S-400 missiles, anti-missile system, because India was given this exception to these sanctions. But in general, there have been concerns in the West when India is buying more weapons from Russia. And also West has been more liberal now to open up to the defense market of India. They are now very favorably promoting their defense equipments to India. We have received a lot of equipment from Israel, France and USA in that regard. Then other external factor would also talk about the position of Russia as a supplier, because it has been now engrossed in a lot of wars itself. It has been engrossed in the wars in 2022 with the Ukraine. It does not seem to have the willingness or capacity to provide as much defense materials. Also, India itself is not just diversifying its position in the import of weapon, it is also now turning out to be a major exporter of arms and ammunition. We are having a lot of emphasis on domestic production of these arms and ammunition. So the plank of India-Russia relationship is not going to be solely based on the defense equipments, because there is a lot of changes that is happening in this sector. And this change is visible in this visit more starkly than ever, because no major defense deal has happened. Even though India was vying for a more supply of S-400 missiles, and Russia reportedly offered the Sukhoi 57 and Russia's reportedly offered a Sukhoi 57 aircrafts. But then no such major defense deal could be inked in this visit. Rather, there is also a change that is visible from Russian side, because it has developed of late a lot of closeness with respect to China. There has been greater influence on their trade factors. China is now the largest trading partner of Russia. They are engaging in multiple defense deals. Even China has bought the S-400 missile system from Russia. There has been a lot of cooperation in the various institutions that they are part of. The SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, is primarily led by Russia and China in their cooperation, even though there are other members. We have this trilateral axis emerging from the Russian side, because Russia along with China and Pakistan is emerging as a new axis. They are cooperating vastly in the strategic sector. They are even holding various joint military exercises. For example, this Druzhba exercise, in which Pakistan also participated with Russia. This raises a lot of concerns with respect to India's position as the defense partnership of India and Russia. But then it is not just a cause of worry, because India-Russia relationship have been marked by a lot of other changes which are positive in nature. And the defense ties have also not nosedived, but their pace and diversity has just changed. Because even now with this data of 36%, Russia is still the largest provider of arms and ammunition to India. Russia is still the provider of the most advanced equipments to India. Russia is still one of the largest leading producer who is willing to jointly cooperate in manufacturing these arms and ammunition. Even to the extent that the jointly produced defense equipments in India with the Russian help are now being exported to the third country. And this is showcasing the new strength of India-Russia relationship that are highlighted on the grounds of economy. Because instead of defense, economy is now the new linchpin of India-Russia ties. While we first discussed that the India-Russia trade ties were nothing to write home about at least a decade ago, they were even less than $10 billion, around $8.9 billion. In the past 5 years, especially during the Russia-Ukraine war and the alleged discount that it is giving on the crude oil exports, India's trade with Russia has grown multifold. It has now grown to the extent of $68.61 billion, close to $70 billion. That is a 7-fold rise in the past 5 years. Then, because there is a growth in this moment, there is a growth in this position, there is a momentum of growth that is happening. We are also having newer target. We want to now reinforce these targets by, in the recent visit that has just happened, the leaders have agreed to raise this goal to $100 billion by 2030. Right now we are around $70 billion. We want this bilateral trade to rise to $100 billion. And economy just doesn't mean trade. There is a lot of emphasis on other issues as well. The drivers of economy, including the energy security of India, is now being assured by Russia. It is still by far the largest energy supplier to India, although the position keeps changing with the Arab nation. In the food security of India, fertilizers supplied by Russia plays a major role, and that is a part and plank of India-Russia relationship. We have supplied various crucial materials, crucial minerals, even including nuclear fuel is also supplied by Russia. That is a major area of strategic cooperation between India and Russia. Even local currency trade mechanism have been established. We are trying to de-dollarize the world to reduce the monopoly of the West that are trying to promote unilateral sanctions on India and Russia. To avoid this situation, there is a promotion of local currency trade mechanism where rupee ruble mechanism has been implemented, and when it has not worked very well because there is a lot of gap, there is a trade gap that is widening over the year. Because even though trade has increased in aggregate number, if we see the export from India, they have largely remained flat. They have always remained around $4 to $5 billion. It's just the import that has increased. So even if India, Russia starts a rupee ruble mechanism, there is nothing more that Russia is buying right now. So it doesn't work out for it. But because there is a shared objective of de-dollarization, they have taken to the UAE dirham mediation. Because some part of payment would be paid in terms of dirham if not dollar. Because UAE in between Delhi and Moscow is a common trading partner and a major trading partner, and because of shared trust they are trading in not in dollar but in dirham, because India and UAE having a very good bilateral trade relation. We are exporting a lot of things to UAE also, but also importing a lot of things, and similarly with the Russia. So this mechanism works out very well. Then it is not just about bilateral trade that is happening presently, the economic significance of present, but also the economic significance of the future. India sees Russia, especially the far eastern side of Russia, the region near the city of Vladivostok, it sees as a investment storehouse because there is a lot of potential for growth there. It is one of the most underdeveloped region of Russia, and India can utilize its expertise in promoting investment there. And we have even established the Chennai-Vladivostok maritime route. There is also possibility of FTA on card. Free trade agreement discussions are going on at a very high pace. There is a possibility of India signing a free trade agreement with the Eurasian Economic Union because India's other FTAs are not happening at the desired pace. India's FTA with USA is still in limbo. What is this Eurasian Economic Union? It is basically an economic union where these members of Central Asia, including Russia, the 5 members, Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, they came together and created an economic union, which is a successor organization to this Eurasian Economic Community. Now they are trying to streamline their tariff to trade as a bloc rather than as individual nations. We must remember these 5 names. 3 of them are having R in their name, 3 R's and 2 K. Armenia, Russia, Belarus, very European names, and 2 Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, both having K in their name. And what do? They go to CCD together, not the cafe coffee day. They do competitiveness enhancement of each other, of every other member of their community. They promote cooperation among these member states by resolving the dispute that happen and by ensuring stable development of these nations. This is the objective of this Eurasian Economic Union, the headquarters of which lies in Moscow for the administrative part, for the commissioning part, and for the dispute resolution, the court of which lies in the Minsk city of Belarus. So this is the prelims related information that you must know about Eurasian Economic Union. Moving to the next aspect of our relation, that it is not just that defense has declined, economy has increased, but multiple other fronts have been opened up in the India-Russia relationship that have been signaled in this particular visit of President Putin. What has changed further? There is a greater people-to-people ties. There has been a joint acknowledgement of the people to people ties and the need of it, because India being a labor surplus country, while Russia needs a lot of skilled labor. And this has been acknowledged by the two agreements that have happened. Because of these issues of excess labor, or labor being a demographic dividend for India, there have been issues of illegal migration that have been happening. To tackle them, cooperation of combating illegal migration agreement has been signed, so that people who move from India to Russia for economic, job or educational purposes are not diverted to the war zone, are not taken to the military camps and made to fight war on behalf of these nations. Then there is also a promotion of temporary movement of citizen, where skilled and unskilled worker would move to the industrial region of Russia. There is precisely a need of more than 5 lakh skilled people in the Ural region of Russia. Ural region is the most industrialized region of Russia that needs the skilled worker of India. And this agreement that have just been signed in this visit would pave the way for this movement. There is a promotion of tourism also. Traditionally, Russian tourists have been a major contributor to the inward footfall of tourists in India. They have been one among the top 15 tourist groups. Before COVID, their number ranged at 2.5 lakhs, but due to disruptions in COVID and the war in Russia, their number have plummeted to 1.6 lakhs. Now an easier movement of these people, these tourists, have been promoted by a visa mechanism, where 30 days free visa would be provided to Russians on arrival in India. This is sought to enhance the economic cooperation as well as people to people cooperation between Indian and Russian people. Then we have idea of technological cooperation that is existing at a greater scale between India and Russia, because nuclear power plant at Kudankulam in India is developed jointly with the help of Russia. It is also supplying various nuclear fuel cycle is being researched jointly by the cooperation between India and Russia. There is promotion of non-power application of nuclear energy that is happening. There is also development of technological use for non-violent purpose beyond nuclear also. The promotion of safe use of space technology, the promotion of non-militarization of space. These agreements have also been inked under this visit. So this marks for broad basing India-Russia ties. Cultural diplomacy has been promoted by signing of multiple agreements. 5 media houses have held agreement with the Russian news channels. Russia Today India as a new channel of state media of Russia has been allowed in this visit. But what the future holds beyond this strategic cooperation is that there is need for diversity of this cooperation being even further expanded by including innovative energy partnership. As India and Russia are seeking to cooperate in the Arctic Council, they must promote newer sources of energy in this Arctic region. They must explore them jointly and harness their potential for renewable energy cooperation. There is a possibility of operationalization of infrastructure projects which have been pending in limbo. For example, India Middle East European Corridor, the idea of INSTC or the India North-South Trade Corridor, International North-South Trade Corridor. These must be implemented by fast-tracking their progress. There is need for balancing this trade asymmetry that is existing with India, because there is a huge gap between the import and export with India. India must seek to diversify the export that it does to Russia. It could enhance this cooperation in field of pharmaceuticals, in field of machinery, in field of gems and jewelries. There are a lot of possibility for this India-Russia relationship to be taken to a next level by promoting strategic convergence for these shared benefits. As President Putin has highlighted, go together, grow together, which is nothing but a rephrasement of the term of India, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, that needs Sabka Prayas also, that needs joint cooperation on these fields, especially in the region, especially in the times when the global community is in a flux, when multilateralism is at stake. There is need for a fairer world order because of possibility of unilateral sanctions that are happening. That makes India-Russia relation to be held in the right spirit, as highlighted by Honorable Prime Minister Modi, that they exist as a pole star. They must continue to do so, but they must do this in various different fields, diversifying from defense to economics to people tie to cultural ties to strategic cooperation in technology to infrastructure. The world is their oyster. Having discussed this, this is the practice question for you. Kindly attempt it and get it evaluated from your mentors. Moving to the next topic. In the simplified section, we have no after hour work calls. This is regarding a private member bill being introduced by MP Supriya Sule of NCP, where she has suggested to bring a law regarding right to disconnect. There have been calls regarding right to disconnect in Australia. They have already passed this law. It has also been done in France, in Portugal. But what is the need of it? Earlier there was a common slogan that 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest and 8 hours for whatever you will. That gave a lot of choice to the workers, but with the digital proliferation and the existence of hyperconnectivity, we are seeing that employees are now constantly under work pressure. They are receiving emails even after work. They are supposed to reply to their managers. They are supposed to do work even in the leisure hours of their life. What it has led to is a situation of excess information, which is now being termed as information obesity, because they are actually consuming more than they require. Like in obesity, what we have is consumption of excess calorie, then you are burning, it is stored as fats in your body. Here in information obesity, because we are consuming more information than that is required due to this fear of FOMO, fear of missing out, due to this hyperconnectivity, due to this constant email, constant use of social media, constant work pressure, employees are now being fed with this lot of information which is not rightly processed in the right context, and it is leading to a lot of health issues, psychological issues that are happening. We have witnessed a lot of deaths among young professionals in India. Given these concerns, a new bill for right to disconnect has been promoted in the recent parliamentary winter session. Not just this, similar bill have been proposed by other member of parliament also. For example, Honorable Shashi Tharoor ji have promoted the bill of Health and Working Condition Code bill. It is seeking to limit the work connect and establish grievance redressal mechanism to provide a mental health support mechanism to prevent suicide among these young professionals. But what does this provision of these bills entail? It basically clearly defines the official working hours. It is not up to the will of the manager or the will of employee. They must be codified in nature. It is supposedly respecting the employee's right to disconnect after these hours. After work hours, you are not supposed to check your email. I mean, even if you do, it's okay. If you don't, then there should be no penal action against you as an employee. There is a provision for development of an employee welfare authority, which was not only study the issues concerning this private sector, the issues concerning the employees' concerns, but also report it, also research on it, and provide solution to the employer who would mediate the conflict between employees and employer. There would be promotion of awareness drive so that the young demographic dividend of India is not lost to this idea of overworking in the digital era. However, there is a lot of concerns with these bills because these are private members' bill, and in the recent history they have not been passed. But first, let's understand what is a private member bill. A private member bill is a legislative proposal which is introduced by an individual MP. Individual MP means not necessarily he is an opposition member, he could be a member of the ruling party as well, but he is not a minister. Thus, the bill that has been introduced is not developed by civil servant, it is not developed by the secretariat of the ministry, it is not being brought by any one ministry, but is a outcome of an individual effort. It may showcase the ideological stance, the personal conviction or the public interest concern of the particular member of parliament. They might have taken some issues, some steps on being urged by the citizen. They might have taken some research help from some LAMP fellow, which is a legislative assistant for member of parliament. It is a scheme run by the PRS Institute, which is promoting responsive governance by people or citizen telling the MPs that this new bill, this new right should be enforced, this new bill should be passed in the parliament. If the government is not making it happen, at least the private member bill could be initiated. There is a set mechanism in the parliament that is existing for it. Every Friday, the last 2.5 hours of business in Lok Sabha is earmarked for the introduction of these private member bill. In Rajya Sabha, it is alternate Friday. So there is a specific time that is allocated for private member bill in the discussions of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, and these bills are often introduced. In the past, we have also seen other members like Tiruchi Siva who promoted a bill for the conditions of the manual scavengers. So a lot of private members bills are introduced every Friday. However, the historical trend has been that only 14 private member bill have been passed till in this more than 75 years of existence of our parliament. And you would be shocked to know the last time a private member bill was passed was in year 1986, when Muslim Women Right to Protection Act was promoted first as an individual MP's effort as a private member bill, although later government introduced the same bill and it was passed, but it was back in 1986, almost 40 years ago. In this 17th Lok Sabha, 729 private member bill were introduced, but none of them passed. There were only 2 which were discussed only. Thus, there has been a lot of lack of progress in this regard of private member bill. And it is important for us because UPSC has already asked a question on private member bill, like what is it, what does it entail? They have asked this question in 2017, you may attempt it. It is asking that it is a bill presented by MP who is not elected but only nominated by President of India. He could be either nominated or elected, doesn't matter once he is in the parliament. He could introduce such a bill. Recently, a private member's bill has been passed in the Parliament of India for the first time in its history. Not the first time and not even recently, because it was, as we discussed, it was passed in the year 1986. So this statement would also be wrong. Thus, the answer would be neither 1 nor 2. Moving to the next topic, which is deal without peace. It is catering to the IR section, international relations sections, because recently President Donald Trump of USA has tried to broker a peace deal between Rwanda and Congo. Mind you, there are 2 Congo. This deal has been conducted with Democratic Republic of Congo. There is other nation of Congo as well. So a peace deal has been brokered between these 2 nations by USA, because there have been a historical military conflict that has existed between the Tutsi rebels of Africa. They have led a very specific M23 rebel group. But why are we even discussing these names? Are the tribes of India insufficient for us to remember that we have to remember the tribes of Africa also now? Like it or not, UPSC has a habit of asking these questions, because as it is a very sadist body, unfortunately, they are more interested in the conflict of the world. They have asked these questions of region often in news, and most of these regions have been conflict region. They have asked about Chechnya region, Darfur, Swat Valley. They've been particular about African regions because they have asked questions here. And not just regions, they have also asked about communities also. The tribes, the ethnic community that live there. For example, question of Rohingya, Madhesi, Kurd, they have asked. So it makes more sense for us to understand these places which are in news, and also the people or the community that are in news because of some conflict existing between them. Let's understand it in detail. What happened was a very unfortunate incident in 1994, that in Rwanda, Tutsi people who were a minority there, they were massacred. Even 8 lakh people of Tutsi community, they were killed by Hutu militia. These were another community, Tutsi was another community, ethnic community there, and Hutu people is allegedly have supposed to kill Tutsi militia, who then left Rwanda, these people, and moved to the neighboring DRC region, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now these Tutsi people have made a militia group there, M23, and this is now fighting the Democratic Republic of Congo government. There has been an issue there between these rebel forces of M23. Now M23 is a very unique name because it comes from a date 23 March 2009, on which some agreement was undertaken between this M23 rebel group and the DRC government, but it eventually failed. So this rebel group of M23, which is functioning in this country of DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, whose capital is Kinshasa, this group is now controlling major region of Goma and Bukavu. These 2 regions this is controlling, and this has led a lot of violent conflict that is happening in this country. And there is an issue between Rwanda and DRC because both of these nations, both DRC and Rwanda, accuse each other of supporting one of these militia groups. We are not supposed to know which group is supported by whom, but then these names, these places of these names and the community names we must remember. That is the whole broad issue with this. This Goma region, Kinshasa, is widely reported in the newspaper. So let's understand it with the help of this context, that North Kivu and South Kivu are the 2 parts of DRC, the nation, and their capital are Goma and Bukavu, which is located in the map right here. Goma is located here and Bukavu is located here. How do we remember them? They are placed on the banks of a lake, which is Lake Kivu. We are in geography, we read about a lot of lakes in the Africa, in the eastern African Rift Valley. There are a lot of lakes. Among them, this Lake Kivu is very important because this region of DRC, of Democratic Republic of Congo, is a very mineral rich region. So we must remember the other lakes that are existing in these region and the names of these places which are in use. So this Goma city is in the North Kivu region and this Bukavu is the capital of the South Kivu region. Then we must remember what is this M23 group. As we just discussed, this M23 is now a rebel group which is formed by this Tutsi community. It is supposedly supported by Rwanda and that is a cause of concern between DRC and Rwanda. Because of this reason, US President is supporting for a arrangement between them, a peace deal between them to ensure peace and development in this resource rich region. Moving to the next topic, Chile's lesson for India's coal conundrum. Under this topic, this article is basically dealing with the GS paper 3 in energy part, where it is seeking to talk about the renewable energy. Why is it important? Because recently, in the recent context, there has been an index that has been published, Climate Change Performance Index, in which India's rank has slipped by 13 points. Earlier it was ranked 10, now it has come to 23. And these writers have ascribed that to the decline or focus on the renewable energy part. Why this is happening? This is ascribed to the India increasing its coal production. It was rising from 778 million ton to 893 million ton in the year 2025 and 2030. Thus, there has been a decline of focus to the coal phase down approach, which was agreed at Glasgow. Our energy basket has been diversified. As per the installed power capacity, only 50% of installed power capacity comes from coal and around 50% comes from the renewable energy. But the issue that has been highlighted here is that despite 50% contribution in the installed power capacity, the production is very less. Around coal is contributing around 75% of the electricity generation. Even though there is capacity for solar, renewable, hydropower, wind power, they are not being used is what this article seeks to suggest. On the other hand, it is comparing with us with the Chile, which has taken some very laudable steps and reduced its coal dependence from 43% in 2016 to 17%. And there are some lessons from its story that we can learn to implement in India. How was Chile able to do this? First, they took policy decision which increased the cost of compliance for the coal power plant, so that it disincentivized these coal power plants. And then on the other hand, on the supply side for renewable energy, they put a lot of competitive bid in place which ensured the bids for renewable energy outweighed the price obtained from the coal power plant. That means renewable energy electricity was more cost efficient compared to the coal produced electricity. And they supplemented that by a lot of infrastructure position because they invested in the energy storage system as well. Because of these steps that they have taken, they were able to, they are targeting the coal phase out year of 2040. As per the position of India at Glasgow, India is targeting 2070 as the carbon neutrality. However, it must be kept in mind that the model of Chile cannot be directly replicated in India due to variation in the size of population and the economic challenges. There are also concerns of socio-economic risk arising from this abrupt closeness of plants that could happen if we were to apply the model of Chile. But then that doesn't mean that we don't take any steps, because as per data reported in various reports, if every 1 gigawatt of coal installed capacity increase leads to 13 to 14% reduction in the infant mortality ratio. That is a cause of concern for the socio-economic development of India anyway. Then the reverse, the damage that is happening to climate change, it would be sapping around 3 to 10% of India's GDP. So if we are not tackling the climate change challenge right now, it is eventually going to have a lot of other socio-economic risk for India as well. Thus, there is need for implementing the idea of global coal phase down, if not phase out. There is need for making coal plants more sustainable by using technology like coal desulfurization, and then implementation of these renewable energy capacity programs. Even if they are present in the energy power mix, even there is a increase in the power capacity, their utilization must be increased. Their plant load factor, that means the degree of which the utilized capacity is being used by the plant of these renewable energy based electricity production, it is being used. This plant load factor has thus to be increased. This must be done by lot of, at least the idea of research and development in the storage capacity of renewable energy must be replicated from Chennai. These are the arguments that we might write in our mains exam, but from a prelims perspective, what we must remember is about climate change performance index, in which India's rank has reduced from 10 to 23. It is published by three NGOs basically, which are think tanks. One is German Watch, New Climate Institute, and Climate Action Network, CAN International. Remember that this is not a UN body that publishes this climate change performance index. There are similar indexes published by WEF as well, so don't be confused. This is published by three think tanks, which is German Watch, New Climate Institution, and Climate Action Network International. If we remember from our prelims perspective, this German Watch NGO, it also published the Global Hunger Index, which is published by German Watch along with another German NGO, Welt Hunger Life. So please remember the organization that publishes such indexes related to climate change or other issues. They have already asked some question on who publishes the Corruption Perception Index. It is published by Transparency International. So these things we must remember from the prelims perspective. How do they measure these climate change performance? They basically assess in 4 categories. One is GHG emission, renewable energy, energy use, and climate policy. So even if India has enhanced its renewable energy, it has not enhanced its energy use from renewable energy. That's why its ranking has plummeted, it has declined. If we talk about who are the top rankers, UK, Denmark, and Morocco. Morocco is a name that you must remember. You do not usually associate that to be a top climate performer, but then that is a fact. So these 3 nations are the leader in this year's climate change performance index. Among the worst performing countries in the G20, they are China, Russia, USA, Saudi Arabia. These are among the worst players in this performance index. Moving to the next topic, we have new police unit in Bihar to focus on safety of women. What is this catering to? This is catering to the topic of our social issues as well as governance part, where we talk about schemes and policies and interventions by government for vulnerable sections. Here new police units have been established in Bihar by a new name of Abhay Brigade. Abhay means in Hindi means fearless. So they are seeking to promote women to be fearless when they conduct themselves in the public sphere, when they conduct themselves in the society. They would be protected by this new brigade of Abhaya, which would be actually headed by a sub-inspector of police and supported by other constable. There is also a lot of accountability mechanism has been established by it, because a monthly report would be established and this report would go to the CID on the every 15th day. What does it entail? It basically entails giving lot of new vehicles to these new police force so that they would monitor the more prone areas where these incident of sexual harassment of women could happen, which would endanger the safety of women. They would be doing a geographical analysis. They would identify these hotspots where such things would happen. Then there is a need for greater awareness. The program also includes the idea of awareness of victim as well as the culprit, because some of these culprits are somewhat minor also. So there would be actual counseling that would happen. In case of a repeated offender, these accused would be sent for juvenile custody to the Juvenile Justice Board. But why are we discussing this? What is the context of it? Because women's safety has been a major cause of concern in India. There has been a lot of steps that have been taken for this promotion of safety and security of this vulnerable section. As per the NCRB data, the National Crime Reports Bureau report, there has been a rise on the crime against women. Despite awareness, despite law enforcement being increasing, there has been a marginal rise, because in year 2023, the report of which came just last month, there have been 4.48 lakh cases of crime against women have been registered. It is increased from 4.45 lakhs in the year 2022. So around 4.5 lakhs cases of crime against women have been registered. And the major state, of course, it has to be Uttar Pradesh, because it is the most populous state of India. Maharashtra is the second most populous state of India. So the ranking of the state in crime against women is not reflective of their law and order situation, but generally of the population that they represent. The Telangana in is leading actually in terms of crime rate per lakh per female population, and this may also be attributed to the degree of awareness that the people may have, because most often the cases of crime against women are not even reported. So if some state is depicting that the rate of crime per person is very high, it doesn't mean the law and order situation is very bad, but maybe because case reported is also rising. To understand this in a broader context in India, we must see that a lot of steps beyond this Abhay Brigade have been taken across India. Across states, state government have also taken a lot of initiative, but across policy sector, there have been steps. It is not just the law and order and the legal steps have been taken. Of course, we have had legal steps like POSH Act, Prevention of Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace. We have had Dowry Prevention Act. We have had Criminal Law Amendment Act 2018, which made it more deterrent for committing sexual offences against women aged less than 12 years, which sought a death penalty for them. But beyond these legal steps, there have been technological interventions that has happened. The Safe City project is a part of Smart City project that seeks to promote CCTV camera across the vulnerable location across cities of these smart cities. Then the idea of 112 helpline number has been established for women in distress. State specific models have also been initiated. Hawkeye app of Telangana is basically a citizen centric app where citizens, especially women who are in case of any distress, they might press an SOS button which is located on their app. They might press that button and their location would be instantly shared with the police, and it would lead to a fast, rapid response that would curb the crime against them by catching the criminal in the real time. These kind of examples, if we are writing in our answers in GS paper 2, GS paper 3, that showcases a lot of value addition. Then we showcase these steps that have been taken in multiple dimension, including institutional steps. For example, Mission Shakti and Sambal. Mission Shakti is seeking to comprehensively establish the security of women, not just from crime, but also give them support after any wrong have been committed with them. It acts as a one-stop center for them. One-stop center for women have been established as an institutional framework. In this regard, states have also taken lead. For example, Telangana, which was notorious for most number of cases per female population, most number of crime rate per women population, it has taken a lot of steps to curb these crimes. For example, Bharosa centers have been established here. What is Bharosa Center? Bharosa Center have been an initiative of IPS Swati Lakera, which is an example that you can even write it in your GS4 ethics paper. This is basically a use of emotional intelligence that she has done, because she was aware of the psychological nature of a female in distress, that she is not feel very comfortable going to a police station. It is considered as beneath their dignity to seek help from police in cases which are very sensitive in nature regarding women. So Bharosa one-stop center were established where all helps required for them would be given to them under one roof. The police help, the counseling help, the shelter would be given to them under this one center of Bharosa Center. They might not even need to walk to a specific police station to get their complaint registered. Then we have had social changes that have been taken, social steps have been taken. For example, Parivartan initiative by Delhi police. The police itself is taking such initiative where they are promoting a gender sensitive behavior among youngsters. Their promotion of Bell Bajao campaign where a community awareness program are being done. So if somebody would see or hear to their neighbors being crying for committing of any domestic violence against any women, it is encouraged that you ring their bell. Don't think that it is an interference of the privacy of an internal matter of a family, but it is your right, your duty to prevent violence, to abjure violence, and to uphold the dignity of women. That is part of our fundamental duty under Article 51A. The campaign by various NGOs like Jagori is promoting the idea of safety and security of women to prevent the female infanticide, so that they are killed before birth only. Then the economic steps have also been taken, which are because economic power is also one step, because economic power takes women one step closer to their security. Economy is also one form of security. So livelihood promotion scheme for women, specifically under Mudra, there have been a earmarking of fund for women. Drone Didi scheme actually target women with SHG help to give them economic opportunity, to give them livelihood, that would raise their awareness and make them more secure member of society. This idea of women's safety is being ensured by various steps, but it is not just these steps that would make this count, but the letter and spirit implementation that would uphold the idea of SDG 5 or gender equality. Moving to the next topic, which is the last topic for our discussion, it is talking about government to streamline its public communications network. The governance part, it is catering to the role of civil services in democracy. The news might interest the civil services aspirant particularly because it is catering to the aspect of civil services exam, because the government is actually beginning a sweeping revamp of its information network. Under this, they are seeking to enhance the intake of Indian Information Services official. They are going to recruit more IIS officers. Who are they? If you have looked beyond the IAS and IPS and IFS in the UPSC official notification, IIS are also recruited from the same exam for which you are preparing. It ranks 9 on this list. So if this article is to be believed, government is planning to enhance the intake of this IIS officer, and not just the quantity but also the quality of work that would be given to them would be changed. But let's first understand what does this IIS officer do. Basically, an Indian Information Services are part of Group A and Group B of Central Services. They are recruited by this UPSC CSE exam only. They act as the official communication link between the government and public. They are responsible for media management, for public information dissemination, for feedback collection for the every policy step that is being taken. Basically, they have hitherto served under the PIB, DD News, All India Radio, Prasar Bharati. They have served across this, and they cater to all the channel, whether it is print media, electronic media, digital media, social media. They work as the spokesperson of special ministry of all the ministry and ensure public messaging is done with a lot of transparency. Now, why it is important? Because of the changes that are being made now, they are going to restructure this IIS services, and they would establish a new board which would ensure a lot of coherence in the communication process. A new board would be established which would ensure a uniformity in the communication of the government. And more importantly, these IIS officers would now be posted abroad. They would be posted in the embassies also, so that it is not just the IFS officer who get to go to abroad for working, but also this Indian Information Services officer would be catering to the embassy work. There they would strengthen the government's communication mechanism overseas to ensure the outreach is done for key initiative or events. Thus, this news must be of lot of interest to you, and if you ever required even more motivation to clear this exam, there it goes as another reason for you to prepare for this exam, to at least get into the IIS if not IFS, to serving abroad for the welfare of nation. That is it in this edition of The Analyst. Thank you very much. Best of luck.